Today we are taking an in-depth look at the ultimate, no-compromise private cinema, the Van Cave. Over the past 7 years, I've experienced over 100 home theaters and private cinemas from around the world. To date, this world-class, fully engineered 13.7.8 Dolby Atmos cinema is the best that I have ever experienced. In this video, we'll take a look at the 21 JBL synthesis speakers, which include JBL's massive flagship SCL1 speakers for the LCRs, plus 7 ultra-high performance subwoofers, which provide the most immersive and realistic audio experience that I've ever had. The 10 15-inch subwoofers from JBL Synthesis, coupled with dual 24-inch infrasonic subwoofers from Ascendo, provided extreme tactile bass that was perfectly balanced with the rest of the system. The 194-inch Seymour screen excellence, paired with a $60,000 Sony projector, MadVR Envy Extreme, and Kaleidescape, provides a breathtaking and completely gorgeous image. This cinema was designed and built by an incredible team, including Paradise Theater, an expert builder, world-class integrator and calibrator, as well as an interior design team that left no detail untouched. With an initial $500,000 budget, let's just say it radically exceeded that. This cinema is a room inside of a room inside of a room. This provides an ultra-low noise floor of 5 dB for absolute isolation. In this video, I sit down with the homeowner Robert Van Man and the entire team behind this masterpiece to discuss in great detail what it took to bring Robert's vision to reality. This is private cinema at its finest. Robert, thank you so much for inviting me into your beautiful home.
My pleasure, Michael.
We have had an amazing experience. Last night, we had several of us in your theater room watching Dune 2, and it was phenomenal. So we're standing out here in front of the Van Cave. So tell us a little bit about that. Why is it called the Van Cave?
Well, my last name is Van Man, so this is a Van Man's man cave. So one of my friends coined it Van Cave at my last house. So we went with that theme through and through.
I love it. This room is going to be phenomenal. Robert, I want to walk everybody through. In this video, guys, you're going to see not only the equipment, we're going to talk about the engineering that went into it. We're going to talk about the calibration. We're going to talk about the acoustics, all of that. There's so much to cover, but it all started with this book right here. I was at CEDIA just last year, 2023, and the designer of this theater approached me and sent me a message. We've been friends for a couple years, and he said, "Hey, I've got a client that wants to give you a gift." I was like, well, that's kind of wild. I didn't know what it was, and so we were filming a bunch of content, and I met up with Sam and I met up with Ryan, and he said, my client has an incredible home theater, and he created this beautiful book, and he wants you to have it. And so I was immediately captivated by the level of detail that went into your home theater. And so in this video, we're going to talk about all of this. And so Robert, again, thank you so much. So we're standing in your game room here. Tell us a little bit about what the game room represents for you and your family, and why you wanted to have a space such as this right before you enter your theater room.
Well, I entertain a lot. So I host Texas Hold'em tournaments and then movie nights. So I've got multiple groups of guys in my life that we do life together. And my home is always kind of the hub. And so I wanted to make the new Van Cave more spacious, more comfortable, and the theater is probably the most nutcase part of this house.
Yeah.
And this theater, the objectives for me was I wanted a completely uncompromised cinema room, and then I wanted it so isolated that I could operate the theater at reference levels.
Right.
And not be heard anywhere else in the house. The one thing I learned from my last house is I had a reasonable media room in the last house, but if my family's not watching the movie with me, it disrupts the house so terribly that I can't use it. So it's useless. Doesn't matter how good it is if you can't use it.
Right.
So I wanted to make sure that this theater I would be able to use anytime, day or night, without disrupting the house.
Yeah, so we were even cranking it last night, and your wife was in the other room, and she wasn't able to hear what was going on in the theater room, and we were jamming out to Dune 2, phenomenal movie. This is a gorgeous room. One thing I've noticed about your theater room, as well as the home itself, you have a lot of wood, beautiful wood. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the house is clad in clear maple, and maple is pretty tricky to stain. So this is actually an 8-layer stain process with what's called blended coats to give it this monochromatic look. And I've seen pictures of really richly stained maple that I had targeted. Yeah. And well, there's so much wood in this house that the company that was providing the trim, they didn't get enough maple in a season to do this house. So we ended up committing to purchasing an entire maple grove in Canada.
Oh my goodness.
So all the wood you see throughout the house, they're all brothers and sisters of each other, because this all came out of this one grove in Canada and went on a train down to Arkansas to be dried and put to use.
Well, everything in this theater room has a story, so I would love to take these guys over here. So as we enter, even before we enter the theater room, of course you've got this beautiful space out here that your guests can come and hang out and have fun, but then you've got room for a bar, you've got snacks. We had snacks back here last night, but just the beautiful decor sets the vibe, and then I absolutely love your marquee. I know there's got to be a story here.
I did all kinds of online shopping, trying to find a theater marquee that I could purchase, and I could not find anything that looked good. So I ended up just kind of drawing out a marquee. I want to do something like this, and we ended up talking with a few different vendors, and my builder found a vendor who would make it for us at a reasonable price. We found a few vendors that were unreasonable, and so it's custom fabricated off my original drawing.
I love it. I
wanted it to look like a classic theater marquee.
Sure. Well, you did a great job in that. And again, we've got beautiful decor. We got popcorn over here. We got snacks. We got ice. I think your wife was even telling me there's a like the Sonic ice over here.
Yeah, Sonic ice machine. The reverse osmosis ahead of that. And
my goodness.
Carbon filtered.
So many pieces of this, even before you get into the theater. So let's head on in. So we're going to come back to this because this is even integral in achieving your goals.
Yeah, so there's 2 acoustic doors and a sound lock.
Yeah. So we've got 2 here. So like I said, we're going to come back to this, but let's go ahead and head on inside and check out this incredible home theater. Robert, tell us what size room we're looking at here.
So the room that you see is about 18 feet wide and 25 feet deep and 12-foot high ceilings. But this is a room within a room within a room.
Yeah.
So the visible room is only 1/3 of the volume of the structural room.
Okay.
So in order to achieve the isolation, there's 3 floor systems and 3 wall structures.
Wow. So that was one of your your primary goals. I want to make a theater room, a private cinema that is super, super quiet. And so to do that takes a lot of engineering, takes a lot of planning. Kind of walk us through what are some of the steps that you took to make this room quiet, because when we were demoing last night, that was one thing that I believe helped bring out all the subtle details in the movie, even when everything was going nuts. I mean, the explosions and the just huge score, but I was able to pick out just some really intricate details through the system. But I really believe a lot of that is because of the acoustics and that low noise floor. So walk us through maybe some of that process.
Well, of course, the engineering that goes into sound isolation has to be very extensive. And I wanted infrasonic subwoofers and I wanted prodigious bass. And that type of energy is so hard to contain in the theater that it has to be carefully engineered. So this set, there's a structural foundation that's typical as to the rest of the house. But then inside the structural foundation and structural walls is a full floating foundation. And then the acoustic wall structures are attached to that floating foundation. And then the ceiling is a suspended ceiling. It's very heavy, but so there's steel supports
Right.
to hold the suspended ceiling, and the ceiling doesn't touch anything. So nothing touches each other.
Right.
So the acoustic walls do not touch the structural walls. You know, there's isolated connections.
Sure.
And then the visible room and the visible walls, those are secured down to a separately isolated subfloor that sits on top of the floating foundation.
Right.
And that subfloor doesn't actually touch the floating foundation.
Man. So it's like a room inside of a room inside of a
Yes.
room.
Yeah, it's triple isolated.
Wow.
And then that door that you went through, you know, that's this acoustic vault door,
Sure.
and it's 550 pounds.
Yeah.
You know, 3 sets of seals.
Sure.
But this theater was, it's kind of an appendage onto the house. And this wall here is the isolation wall.
Okay.
And behind this wall is the big garage.
Right.
And this wall that you see is 38 inches thick.
Wow.
So there's 15 different layers
Yeah.
of materials in that 38 inches. And that is, Paradise Theater calculated that wall would have an STC of 114,
Okay.
which is effectively means, 114 decibel sound in here, 1 meter beyond that wall would
You
be
won't hear it.
imperceptible.
Wow. That's incredible, because I know my whole house knows it when I'm listening to
Yeah.
my theater room. I didn't have the ability to do this. So building a home from scratch, this was a 5-year plan, building this project. The home, the theater room, but the theater room actually started 5 years ago, right?
It did. Yeah, so the theater actually held up the start of construction because, as we were doing the initial theater design, we needed to get the footprint for the theater, and that was the last thing that we wrapped up before we could complete the architecture drawings for the house.
Yeah.
And go for a building permit.
So Robert, we're standing in front of this massive screen. Tell us a little bit about the screen. What size are we looking at? I'm 5'11", you're
I'm 6'0".
6 foot. And so just to give you perspective, this is a massive screen. So what are we looking at here?
So the screen is 194-inch diagonal. So right now it's at a 240 aspect ratio, but
Okay.
the shade can go up to
Sure,
a
so you've got
16 by
electronic
9.
masking.
Yes. So it's a Seymour Excellence screen.
Okay.
Of course, acoustically transparent.
Right.
One of the things about this screen is this was shipped to us like early in the project.
Okay.
And it came in this massive crate that
Sure.
basically took an entire parking spot in the garage for this screen box.
Okay.
And it sat in that box for multiple years.
Wow.
Until it was ready to be installed.
Right. So you had that in prep, ready to go.
Yeah.
Well, this is super cool because not only is it big, massive, you mentioned it's acoustically transparent. So we've got speakers directly behind here. But then the masking allows us to get better perceived contrast, a beautiful, more bright image, at least visually from our eyes when we're hiding those gray bars when it switches from 16 by 9 to like a 2.35 or 240 aspect ratio. And so we got the screen up front, massive screen. What kind of projector are we projecting on the screen?
So this is a Sony, I think it's VW 5000 ES.
Okay.
So one of the things is I had read all about the Hahn Theater in Connecticut.
Oh, yeah.
And that was really the inspiration for this theater.
Okay.
The Hahn Theater, kind of the great attributes of that home theater of the decade was, a lot of elaborate wood trim. It had fabric walls. It had infrasonic subwoofers, a lot of them for that theater. Now the Hahn Theater was much larger than this theater.
Yeah.
So I wanted a cozier version of the Hahn Theater.
Right.
And then the Hahn Theater now is like 6 or 7 years old. So I wanted to take advantage of all the newest technology. And but the Hahn Theater was really the inspiration behind the Van Cave Theater.
Robert, this is a big room, but you've got a lot of speakers, and part of that is to make sure all of these 8 theater seats get a great experience. And so I'd love to talk through what are the speakers that are really hidden behind this room, behind the screen, and behind this beautiful fabric. Kind of walk us through the speaker layout. What are we looking at?
So this theater, there's 13 bed layer speakers. There's 7 subwoofers. Technically, I think there's 12 subwoofers because 5 of them are separately addressable subs. And then there's 8 Atmos speakers in the ceiling. So it's a 13-7-8 theater.
Man. And so these are right behind this acoustically transparent screen and in front of the big screen. So let's start maybe up there. What's your LCR? What are your left, center, right?
So the speakers in my theater are JBL synthesis speakers. And I have the new SCL ones as my LCRs.
Okay.
And then the surround and the Atmos speakers are all JBL synthesis SCL 6s, but they're all in their own boxes.
Right.
Because one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted every speaker to be both vertically and horizontally aimed to the primary listening position.
Nice.
So, you know, like the SCL 6 is designed to be mounted in a wall, and we wanted to aim the speakers, so we had to make our own back boxes for each one of them. But in order to kind of maximize the volume behind or the volume of the back boxes, we have about 6 different sizes of boxes that we designed for the SCL 6s to fit in this room.
Sure, because you get different spaces here.
Like there's a speaker behind this column, but that one, because of the sizing, that had to be the smallest of them, where the speaker over here is at a sharp angle.
Right.
So it's like a 40-degree angle off that wall. And the beauty of the SCL 6s is they're narrow, so we could get significant angles.
Sure.
So we've got a foot of space beyond the visible walls on the sides, and then the front we have 4 feet of space beyond the screen, and the back we have 3 feet behind the back wall.
Right. So your room is getting bigger, Robert.
Yeah. So like I said, it's a room within a room within a room.
Yeah.
The visible room is about 18 by 26 with 12-foot visible ceilings.
Right.
The acoustic room, you know, where the speakers are, and what you hear, that's 20 feet wide, but 31 feet long and 14 feet high.
Right.
So that's the acoustic volume. And then the structural space behind that is a lot larger, you know, to accommodate the suspended ceiling.
Sure.
One of the interesting things is between the 3 rooms, the visible room is only 1/3 of the volume of the structural room.
Wow. That's so these are things like, I'm hoping this video even brings some education to those of you that want to do a dedicated private cinema like this. These are some things you got to think about. And so you were very intentional at where you put the theater in relation to your home. You said you put it behind the garage.
Right.
You've got it off to the edge of your entertainment room or game room outside. And so those are great decisions that you've made to help make sure that that's a reality and doesn't impede on everybody else in the other parts of the home. So I love the speakers that you've got. We heard them last night. Truly spectacular, incredibly detailed, definitely not bright. I love compression drivers. I've always loved horns. And I love what JBL Synthesis brings to the table for home theater. But you got some crazy subwoofers going on in here. You said you've got 7 subwoofers, and one of them we can even see. So we'll take a walk back here and show you guys. So these are some monster subwoofers from JBL, but there's also some other subwoofers for infrasonics. So let's take a look at this. Robert, what are we looking at back here? So this is one of your surround backs.
Yes. So the main subwoofers are the JBL SSW ones. So these are as 2 15-inch drivers, but they're separately driven. They're separately ported, and they're driven by a dedicated 5200 watt amplifier.
Okay.
So each of the drivers gets its own 2600 watt channel.
Oh my goodness.
And then all of the surround and Atmos speakers are on ATI amplifiers. They get 300 watts per channel on the surrounds and Atmos. So then the LCR speakers, each of those has their own dedicated 1000 watt amplifier two channel amplifiers.
Right.
So one channel is driving the low frequency, another channel is driving the high frequencies.
Right.
And it's the ATI amps that are used are super quiet amps. And that enables us to get ultra quiet 1,000 watts for each of the LCR speakers.
Man, so lots of power. We'll talk about all the gear when we go into your equipment room, but you can kind of see over here, hopefully with the lighting, if not, I'll put some B-roll here for you guys to see, but you can see there's a speaker right in here.
Yeah, I turned on the backlights behind the grill.
Yeah.
It may not show up on video.
Yeah, like I said, I've got some B-roll if it doesn't capture here, but being able to hide everything, but still maintain the beautifully aesthetics of the room and capture like your passion. I mean, you've seen this decor in your whole room, in your whole home, and to be able to bring that into your theater room and this private cinema, this is just an extension of what you've already done in the rest of the home. So it just feels super natural in here.
Yeah. Yeah, we wanted the theater to carry the same theme and feel as the rest of the house, which is a vast amount of maple trim and kind of richly stained maple we wanted to carry into the theater.
So Robert, we have two SSW1s from JBL Synthesis in the back. Now that's huge for most people, but that's not all. You've got three up here in the front. There's one down here on the bottom, horizontal.
Front and center.
And then we've got two that are up high.
Yeah, two in the upper left and right corners.
So even before we get to the other big extreme, why in the world would you need 5 subwoofers in this room?
So it had to do a bit with modeling of the acoustics. Paradise Theater concluded that we would benefit from having 5 subs,
Sure.
rather than 2 or 4 even.
Right.
But we've got 2 Ascendo infrasonic subs.
Yeah.
So in the front left and right corner are the truly big subs.
Right.
That you heard last night in Dune 2.
My organs are still kind of getting rearranged back to where they were. That was a lot of tactile bass.
Yeah.
So it was so integrated into the entire system. It didn't feel like it was, because some people think there's no way that you need that much power, that much subwoofer. But what it allowed it to do is no matter what we were watching, even at reference volume, it was super clean, super tight, super tactile. And I sat here, you graciously let me sit in the primary position, and Brad, but I can guarantee, because you've got multiple subwoofers and because of the team that has dialed this in and calibrated it properly, this seat gets good bass. This seat, that seat, and all across this room. That's one of the big reasons you want to add multiple subwoofers, is so that, not that you just get more volume, you get more headroom, you get cleaner bass, but you also get smoother bass response across each seat.
So the Ascendo subs, those are focused from 25 hertz down to 2 hertz.
Okay, so the super low stuff, yeah.
Oh yes, and the JBL SSW1s, those had a lot of energy down to 16 hertz.
Okay.
But we're driving those down to 25 hertz.
All right, gotcha. So you can kind of trim those back and just said, hey, Ascendo, y'all can handle the really, really low stuff. So a lot of people, always ask me, they're like, Michael, is there really that much content down that low? Watch Dune 2. Yes, sir. There absolutely is some content down there. Because there was a lot of times I was even feeling stuff, and we did some demos of other movies that I'm very familiar with, and I'm going to go back and watch those because I don't remember, because mine extend very low too in my room, but I don't remember feeling certain things. You didn't hear it, but you certainly felt it in a quiet place, different scenes. And I'm going to have to back up earlier because my scenes starts a little bit further than yours does. So I'm going to back up and go back to that part. But there's parts where he's walking upstairs and you just feel it's like a ruffle, but you don't hear it, but you certainly feel it. So I love infrasonics, and I love what the Ascendo 24-inch dual 24s have done in this room.
So one of the other parts of the equation with the subwoofers is how they're mounted. So the JBL subwoofers, they weigh 350 pounds each. So that's a whole lot of mass for those subwoofers. The Ascendos, which have a lot more volume, those only weigh 242 pounds.
Sure.
So we wanted to, everything's can be a compromise. We wanted to have maximum speaker performance
Right.
while also minimizing energy that transfers to the rest of the house.
Sure.
And so the way that we approached mounting the speakers is with a high mass rigid mounting that's highly isolated
Okay.
from the subfloor. So the subwoofers in the front are on these massive steel stands.
And these are up kind of right here, just
Yeah,
in
so
perspective.
in this corner, I mean, it goes back behind that wall,
Sure.
behind that wall. The subwoofer stands weigh 1,000 pounds. So there's multiple 1-inch solid steel plates
Okay.
as part of the base assembly. And like the Ascendo subs, they are bolted into this 1,000-pound assembly and compressed.
Okay.
So they're sandwiched in between two massive vinyl layers
Right.
under heavy compression. So they behave as a 1,000-pound subwoofer.
Wow.
So the cabinets don't move,
Yeah.
is the point. But that whole assembly is highly isolated from the floor below using sorbethane isolation rings.
Okay.
So I was doing some research about what are the best isolation materials that are available, and I came across sorbethane.
Right.
And I talked with the engineers at Sorbethane, that's actually their company name, and I was initially thinking, looking at their catalog, that a sheet of Sorbethane would be the way to isolate the substands from the
Right. Sure.
subfloor.
Like a flat sheet.
And they recommended no, should go with the isolation rings because you get deflection on both the inner circle and the outer circle.
Right.
So there's 8 sorbethane rings under each of those subwoofer stands. And what was interesting is during testing, these subwoofers, they are floating. So these are jelly-like gooey rings.
Right.
And I could, just with that amount of pressure,
And start to move
I
those.
could twist and deflect
Wow.
the 1,000-pound subwoofer stands
Yeah.
with very little pressure, because I mean they are truly floating
Right.
on these rings, and it just makes it nigh to impossible for those vibrations and that energy to transfer to the layer below it,
Right.
which would then transfer to the rest of the house.
Sure. So,
So-
one thing I hope you guys are hearing is that, again, it goes back to intentionality. It goes back to engineering. It goes back to science. Doing some things to accomplish your goals, assembling a team that can help guide you in that. We're going to talk to each one of them on what were some of the decisions that they helped with you in that process to make this dream a reality. But I love the fact that you're involved in all of this. And I know my audience is going to respect that so much, because sometimes I go to a home theater of really high end and they may not know what they have. They may not know model numbers, and not that we have to know everything, but you know what's behind this wall. You know the dimensions. You know there's 3 rooms. You know about these, what are they called again?
Sorbethane isolation rings.
See, I don't even know sorbethane, and that's super cool to me. And the fact that you went and picked out, what fabric you wanted to be able to see that and transparent. I love that about this theater, because it captures your passion for home cinema and home theater. So Robert, you told us about how you mounted the subwoofers, but you've also got LCRs back here, and those are big old honking speakers. So I'm assuming maybe there's some mounting there as well. What'd you do there?
Yeah, so the same approach went to the LCRs as the subwoofer, which was using very high mass and rigidly mounting, coupling the speakers to this high mass baffle wall.
Okay.
And then highly isolate that system from the subfloor. So behind this screen is this huge baffle wall that weighs 2,000 pounds just by itself. And that baffle wall, holds the LCR speakers, and like every speaker in this room, it's both vertically and horizontally aimed to the primary listening positions. But those LCR speakers are rigidly mounted to the baffle wall, and in order to rigidly mount those speakers, I had to drill 40 holes into my expensive SCL1
Right.
flagship speakers.
Oh, that'd be hard for me.
Had to drill 40 holes, and,
Wow.
and JBL says, you're going to avoid the warranty.
You're like, I'll buy
like-
some more if I have to.
It is what it is.
Yeah, I don't want them coming down in the middle of Dune 2. How about that?
So we have 8 heavy steel brackets on each of the SCL1s,
Okay.
mounting that tight into the baffle wall.
Right.
And then there's acoustic absorption on the baffle wall, and the baffle wall is filled with rock wool insulation.
Okay.
And it's 3 layers thick. It's a beast. And then it's sitting on this heavy steel stand
Sure.
as well. And then that whole assembly sits on, I think, 24 sorbethane isolation rings across that
Right.
whole structure.
So putting acoustic treatment behind, if you really think about it, you don't want any reflections back here. You want that sound to stop. You want it to emanate from the screen, fill this space out here, but we don't want that sound hitting the back wall, coming back here. Truthfully, in my room, I didn't do that. I wish I would have, but the baffle wall allows you to get that great sound coming out, isolating that from the front and the back. Because sound, I didn't realize this for a long time, sound not only travels out, but it'll wrap around a speaker. So
One of the benefits of the baffle wall
Yeah.
is controlling that. I think in this industry, I see very little emphasis on how speakers are mounted. And Michael, I don't know if you've ever done an experiment like I have. You take a speaker and you listen to it, sitting on a shelf or on the floor, and then you heavyweight the speaker. You take a big chunk of marble,
Right.
put it on top of that speaker,
no, I haven't.
and then listen to it. It's like a different speaker.
Interesting.
Because the physics behind it, you want the speaker box to not move.
Yeah,
you want
like
it
inert.
rock solid.
Yeah.
But you've got the drawback. If you hard mount big speakers, that's the way to get the best sound out of the speakers. It's also the worst way to isolate the speakers from rattling the walls in your house. So that's why we went with this heavy mass approach with rigid mounting,
Right.
and then high isolation underneath it, so it wouldn't transfer that energy.
So last night we watched a 3-hour movie, Dune 2, in some incredibly comfortable seats. And so when you're building a home theater, seating is a big part of that. Not only aesthetically, but getting the features that you want, the comfortability that you want. I've never sat in these particular seats. Tell us a little bit about the choice here and why you went with these.
So probably the thing that drove me to these are Cinematech Ferrari incliners, and the thing that drove me to these was the leather choices. So I looked at a number of other seating manufacturers and looked at leather samples, and anyhow, I like this leather, and that primarily drove the decision.
Right.
And then what you may not see from the camera is we've got 4 bar stools on the bar, and I was able to purchase the leather from Cinematech that they used for this seating.
Right.
And then we shipped that leather to another furniture company that had bar stools that I liked, and they wrapped the bar stools in the exact leather that the Cinematech recliners use,
Right.
so that it matches.
So in my theater room, I wanted to have individual seating. My wife wants a couch. You kind of accomplished that in this theater with these theater seats. So how'd you do that?
Well, in my last media room, we had love seats in the front, and my wife and I, we love each other. And
Yeah.
we like to sit together during movies and not have a separation. If I'm watching it with the guys,
Yeah,
I
sure.
kind of like the separation.
Absolutely. I didn't want Brad snuggling up against me.
So we wanted a love seat in the front, and then the rest of the seating is individual.
Yeah. So these are beautiful seats, and I'm assuming that there's probably a lot of customization you can do from the leather choice, maybe even the types of cup holders and the color, whether you want chrome or bronze, probably heated seats. I think Steve was telling us some of those options, but just really you kind of make these like you want them, and you've got these beautiful tray tables over here. Like that's legit wood.
Yeah.
It's not a piece of plastic. It's not fake, like a fake carbon fiber, And so these are real wood. Again, ties in beautifully with the woodwork in here. In a theater room, typically, we come in here just to watch movies, but you opted to add a little bar section back here with some bar stools. Why'd you go that route? And tell us a little bit about that, because this is gorgeous. Like, this is really a showpiece as well as the rest of the theater room.
Well, I wanted to have really overflow seating is what drives that, and then the ability, if we're serving dinner while we're watching a movie, somebody could bring substantial food and eat it from the bar, and the recliners are good for popcorn and drinks, but maybe not a plate.
Yeah. And one thing, even as we're sitting here, I just thought of, I can already tell that there was a lot of thought that went into your sight lines.
Oh, yeah.
Sight lines is basically when I'm sitting here, if there's somebody in front of me, or if somebody's back here and there's somebody here, how's that going to impact the image? Is their head going to be in that? And so you've got your screen up, elevated a little bit, but my eyes are still in the lower third, which is ideal when you want to watch a movie. Same thing down here. And then the other thing that I saw too is the masking. We talked about that earlier. You're able to mask from the top down to bring that screen down. So again, just so much thought. And
So a lot of the credit for that really should go to Paradise. Paradise provided us almost 100 pages of detailed drawings and design.
wow.
So Paradise did sightline studies, early on the process, so that we would be able to ensure that the seating was staged at the correct height, so we wouldn't be looking in the back of somebody's head.
Yeah.
And everyone would have clear sight lines. So there's drawings of sight lines from each seat.
So here we've got Keshav. He's the lead acoustical engineer at Paradise Theater. Keshav, you and your team had a major part in this room. And so I wanted to come back here and show you guys some of the acoustical treatment, but talk about the engineering that went behind that, some of the choices that you made and recommended for this personal cinema here.
Yeah, so I want to start with the fact that we're really big on predictive modeling. Because in a room like this, and many of the theaters that we design, you can't just change things all willy-nilly once the room's built. Subwoofers, they have to be where they are. You can't change the seats. So everything has to come together before the room's built to actually make sure that we're getting the performance that the client wants. So first, it starts with the quiet room construction. So we modeled the actual wall buildup, the floor, the ceiling, to make sure that we're actually getting the noise floor in here that we want, and we're not sending sound outside of the theater, because as Robert said, he wanted the rest of the house to not hear what's happening in here.
Yeah.
So one part of that is, we touched on sound leaving out, but we didn't really talk about sound coming into the theater. And so one of the great things about this is that we have a noise floor of about NC5, which, if you don't know what NC is, it's noise criteria. So in our industry, NC15, NC20, that's considered top of the line, ultra high performance theater. And we're hitting NC5. So we invested in a special microphone just to measure this room.
Wow.
And we measured a noise floor of about 0 dB, which is about NC5.
Okay.
So at that point, you're not hearing, that's the threshold of human hearing.
Wow.
So it's pure silence. And so what that means is that, that you're taking full advantage of the dynamic range of the speaker. So in a movie like Quiet Place or Gravity, where you have these scenes that are really silent, you can actually hear that silence. And every detail comes out. It's not masked by, HVAC noise or the garage or anything like that.
Right, stuff that's happening outside your room externally.
Right, exactly. So that's kind of where we start. That gives us a footprint of the room.
Okay.
And then we go into low frequency modeling. So you had asked prior, why do we have 5 subs, not just 2 or 3? So we first start with how many subs do we need to actually hit the levels that Robert wants.
Okay.
And then we look at how many subs do we need to get, consistent low frequency response in the room and a very linear bass response in the room. So these sub positions at the front and the back, they're very specific to this room and to the seating positions. So we actually ran over 5,000 simulations looking at different combinations of subwoofer quantity, positions, seating locations, along with this room size and the low frequency treatment that we have in here. And so that's how we arrived with the configuration you see here, 2 in the back, 3 at the front, along with the 2 infrasonics. So our process here is actually split into 2 with low frequencies. We had modeled the audible low frequency range from 20 to 120 for LFE, and then the infrasonic range. And then from there, we go into high frequency modeling. So with high frequency, we want to optimize for reverberation time,
Right.
the reflections in the room, and making sure all the speakers are angled properly so we get good dispersion and even coverage in the seating area. Yeah. So, with these treatments here, we have diffusers, and, behind all the fabric, we have diffusers, absorbers, and then some treatment that's a hybrid of both, a hybrid absorber diffuser. So, what we're optimizing for is we want to treat all the critical reflections, so either diffusing them or absorbing them. And then we're trying to optimize the reverberation time, because every room, based on its room volume, has a optimal reverberation time.
Okay.
And so we're looking at that. We're running simulations to make sure that the acoustic treatment and all the materials in here are giving us that optimal RT.
Because you can over deaden a room and you can have a room that's too lively.
Exactly.
So by running those simulations, you knew exactly how much treatment and probably even where to place those.
Yeah, exactly. And then again, with the speaker aiming, like you had said earlier, or Robert had said, that these speakers are angled vertically and horizontally. So if you just have them flat, like you can see in some rooms where the wide speaker might be flat on a wall.
Sure.
Well, in that case, most of the seating area is on very off axis.
Off axis, right.
So you're losing a lot of that high frequency content. So with this, we're able to maximize its coverage and get a very uniform, consistent experience.
Okay, Chev, you mentioned that in this room you were able to achieve NC5, which is the level of the noise in this room. So there's a lot of things that had to happen, but since we're standing here, projectors make a lot of noise. There's a big fan on the front, sometimes there's fans on the back. There's heat that's generated that comes into the room. So I imagine there's some interesting stuff engineering-wise going on here to help mitigate that so that you could help or achieve that NC5. So maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the projector, it's in a dedicated projector box that has multiple layers of plywood to keep the sound inside the box. It's also double isolated, so the projector itself is floating within the box, and there's insulation inside the box.
Okay.
And that box is completely detached from the theater room.
Interesting.
So there's no vibration transfer, no sound transfer from the projector into the room. And in most theaters, the projector is projector and HVAC is kind of your main culprits of noise.
Sure.
So this tackles one of them. So the other component of this is the HVAC, because we need to hit that NC5 noise floor.
Okay.
And so we have 75 feet of duct. There's duct silencers, rounded corners, insulated duct lining. So all that contributes to this extremely quiet noise floor.
Interesting. And so in my room, kind of similar as far as my projector's outside the room. I don't have the fancy box inside of a box, but I don't have a glass in front of that. So I'm assuming we got to have a glass to prevent that sound from coming from the front. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, this is a double pane glass, so each glass has a separate angle to it. So all that, every single little minute detail contributes to this ultra low noise floor. So another big component is the HVAC grills themselves. We talked about the duct and the modeling that went into that. But in this room, we have 26 feet of linear HVAC duct.
Okay.
And we actually only needed 5 feet. But what the 26 feet allows us to do is slow down the air velocity and reduce any sort of air turbulence that's going to create noise in the room.
Sure. And we don't see them. So I think that's even, so again, going back to that design, but there's function. There's like a method to the madness here. I don't see any vents, and so I'm assuming they're kind of tucked in up way high?
Yep. Yeah, you can barely see it if you're back here, but yeah, it's all pretty much hidden, and there's one here just at the front of the room.
So you've got this big one here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So a lot of engineering and thought went into that. Again, all of these pieces play a role in how much noise, and I never really realized how impactful that was until I experienced this theater firsthand. I've never experienced a theater room that was this quiet, and I really, really believe that that was a huge contributing factor of being able to hear those intricate details in the movie even when stuff was just going crazy in the scene that we were watching.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if your noise floor is, say, 20 dB, which is considered a high-level recording studio, that 20 dB, anything that's playing from your speakers below or at 20 dB is just going to get masked by the noise of the room. So you're able to hear the quietest little details, and it just all comes through. And of course, with dynamic speakers like this, you can hear the loudest booms. So you just have this almost infinite dynamic range.
So we have Sam Cavett, the founder of Paradise Theater. Sam, to put together a beautiful private cinema such as this, I'm sure there's a massive process, and I'd love for you to kind of walk us through what does that look like when somebody approaches you, a client says, hey Sam, I've got a vision, I have some ideas, but I need help making that happen. Walk us through that process. What does that look like?
It's that's a great question, because we come in the room, we look at it, and we see all this beautiful woodwork and a big screen and a lot of seats. That's what we can see, but what makes the magic happen is everything behind the scenes. And those things don't happen haphazardly, as you mentioned earlier. It's intentional.
Yeah.
And I've been doing private cinema for a little bit.
A little
over 30 years, and we have developed that process over that time, and it's become what we feel is the right way to go about creating a room like this and getting the results that we want to provide our client. And so with that process, we do all of the structural sizing, the isolation design, the modeling of that, the interior acoustics, the speaker layouts, the assessment of the system to make sure it's going to, I like to say, to fly the plane over the mountain. It wouldn't be any good if we crashed on the hillside, but we do all of that stuff based on engineering and so forth. And all of those processes have been developed over time. And as we say, we're never satisfied with the process. We're always developing the process. We like to say we're always working on our best work, because we continue to develop that, and we're sitting in our best work right now. So that's pretty amazing.
Well, you mentioned that, and I've shared this just briefly on social media. I've experienced probably 100 plus home theaters. This one takes it.
Thank you.
By far, the overall experience, the LFE, the immersion, the beautifulness of it, the acoustics, this was incredibly well done. So your team and the others that have been a part of this, phenomenal job.
I appreciate you saying that very much. And I'm glad you said a team, because that's something that Paradise Theater is dedicated to, is working collaboratively. And that collaboration is both internally and externally. And the external collaboration is how we were actually introduced to this project, is through the systems integrator, which is Elliston Systems here in Dallas. And Steve Elliston introduced us and brought us in on the project, which was, that's a very important collaboration for us always, to work closely with the integrator.
So here we've got Steve Elliston with Elliston Systems and Design. Steve, we've worked together before. Yeah. A couple years ago at CEDIA, I came over to your showroom, Brad and I, and we filmed your amazing theater, your showroom. You handle all kinds of designs, and you're the integrator of Robert's project. And so I would love to kind of share the electronic side of it, because we've got all these massive speakers, we've got this beautiful system, but we got to have the horsepower behind it. You help figure out what would be the appropriate settings and solution for that. And so I'd love for you to walk us through that and kind of how the Elliston System and Designs fit into this whole project, this collaborative effort.
Yeah, so we were first introduced to Robert several years ago. This has been a long project. And then I had the privilege of introducing him to Paradise Theater. I thought that would be a great match. And so I knew from the very, very beginning that this was going to be a special project. I'll never forget, Robert brought a Blu-ray with him, and it was the Blue Man Group concert. And we were sitting in our theater, the one that you sat in, and he said, hey, can you increase the volume for me? And I said, of course. So I increased it. He goes, no, a little bit more. And I think we went through that 4 times.
Wow.
Robert likes to hear the audio at a very, very high level.
Sure.
And I knew that he was enthusiast and this was going to be a special project. So basically, collaboration with Paradise, our team, taking their design, having my team here, countless number of hours for all of the wiring, rattle tests during the construction process, all the equipment. So we staged everything at our showroom prior to delivering it here. So
Okay,
we had
interesting.
kind of a burn-in period.
Nice, okay.
With our equipment. This theater is controlled by a Crestron system as well as Lutron for lighting. So Robert likes to have full control over his lighting.
Yeah.
So he's got individual lighting control, he's got scene-based, and it's a very simple, intuitive remote, so anyone can come in and operate the system. But I'll kind of break it down for you if you'd
go
like.
ahead.
So he is utilizing a Kaleidescape as his movie server. We also have an Apple TV. One of the things that we believe in, and with our company, it starts with clean power. So you'll see at the bottom here, we do have a Taurus anti-toroidal power transformer down here. So it takes the noise out of the power lines.
Okay.
Because in Texas, we certainly do have some power issues. Crestron control system. And then of course over here, this is all the heavy lifting for the JBL synthesis system. We have our processor up here at the top. Very similar to a Trinoff that we showed Robert in our showroom. This is JBL's version. We've got all of our JBL amplifiers. And we went with ATI. It's a very clean, quiet amplifier for this project. But this is, you can see how many Class D amplifiers that we have on this project.
So one thing, again, you had mentioned that these are quiet. Robert even shared that earlier in the video that he wanted to make sure that, I guess the original amplifiers, these may have a little bit more, a higher noise floor possibly.
Yes, just
And
a
so
little bit.
going with this, again, you captured his vision and you're like, okay, we need to make sure that the equipment that we pick out and choose isn't just right for the speakers, but it's right for his application, his room, and that noise floor that they were striving for. So that is a ton of horsepower.
And a ton of wire, as you can see.
Yeah, so even looking up here, you've got probably miles and miles and miles of cable that had to be run from here to the theater room, through the attic, around the room. Organizing that, honestly, is a science. I know we can't, there's no way to see behind here, but I guarantee you it's immaculate back there. It's tidy, and that's even an art form in itself, I believe.
In a room like this also takes a lot of manpower, as Robert mentioned about the weight of the speakers and the weight of the stands. We were able to configure the speakers so that if in case something went out, we'd be able to easily remove that speaker. I say easily, it's a very heavy speaker, but it was Robert's idea to actually do that, to make it to where if we had to take the screen down and access the speakers from the baffle wall that we can.
Sure. So you've got accessibility to that, just in case.
From the front side, that's right.
Hopefully he doesn't want to upgrade anytime soon, because then you got to change a whole lot.
I doubt it. I don't think he needs to for quite some time. This is the best of the best.
This is truly, truly in-game setup.
Yeah.
And we also work with, if there is an architect that's actively involved, work closely with the architect. In this case, we also work very closely with the general contractor that built the entire house.
Yeah.
But we were asking him to build, I think he said, a spaceship inside of the house. So we were able to work closely with them.
So this is Brandon Bush with Custom Homes of Texas. Brandon, you had a huge role in this because you built this. So I would love to talk about some of the elements of this room that probably were even some challenges that you had to figure out and overcome. Was this anything like you've ever done before?
No, this was the very first. Yeah, to this magnitude. I mean, we've built a lot of theaters over the years, but nothing like this.
Sure. Now there was a certain phrase I heard that you described this. What did you describe it as?
Well, this is a big house, and it's got a lot of unique characteristics. It's got a lot of trim details and a lot of this beautiful maple that you see here. But I would say it all the time. It's like, this is like building an alien spaceship inside of a really nice house.
Yeah.
Just the level of HVAC, the electrical, the low voltage, the speaker wires, and just obviously the decoupling this room completely from the home, which is kind of what we're going to talk about now, I think, which is this soundproof door. So
massive door here, right?
Yeah, big
Tell me
heavy
about
door.
This, this door takes a little bit to pull.
This door is about 5 inches thick. It's got multiple different layers of seals on it, actually 3 different seals. The door weighs about 550 pounds.
Right.
As it opens, the hinges actually raise up.
Okay.
So that when the door closes, the threshold actually seals at the base. So, which is unique to this particular door, and we can look at the Kinetics door next. So this door right here, it's my understanding this is the same door they use in all the UN buildings around the world for their soundproof rooms. And it was quite the challenge to get in here. It's just a big, heavy door. It's heavy to work with, and it's in a really tight spot. Once we walk inside here, we can see this room to help decouple it from the rest of the home. The wall separating the theater from the home is about this thickness right here. So this raised panel that we have here between this door is kind of where everything happens. So we've got multiple layers of 5/8 inch sheetrock, we've got mass weighted vinyl, we've got multiple layers of 5/8 inch plywood, and then we have haydide block fully filled with concrete all the way to the roof deck. So we took it all the way through the attic, even up to the roof deck, to really just try to isolate the sound. And we kind of step into this vestibule, which kind of becomes a airlock chamber between the home and this door. And in this particular door that separates us from the game room is actually another Kinetics door. So it's another heavy sealed door. It's got the threshold sealed on it, seal all the way around, and it's a very thick, dense door. So we actually have 2 separate doors here for soundproofing this room from the rest of the house.
Now, Brandon, most people probably that are building something like this magnitude, they might just opt for that, correct?
Yeah, I mean, this Kinetic door is a fantastic door, and it's what I would see probably in most regular home theaters, that they just want to knock down some sound between their theater and the rest of the home,
But this is no ordinary theater, man. This is, we want to make no compromises, is the idea that I get through this whole conversation. We want to make sure that we do this thing right. And to the very best of our ability, and to meet those standards that Robert had. But you also mentioned a minute ago, there were other things in this room to help isolate that room. Maybe come on back in and we'll walk our guys through that process.
So in part of decoupling this room from the rest of the home, we talked about basically a concrete wall separating this room from the house. So all of these walls that you see here are on a floating floor system. So we've got foam blocks that we then poured concrete over, which is totally separated from the foundation of the rest of the home. These walls are then built on top of that. And then these walls, to help support them, are also connected to the exterior walls, but they're all done through rubber decoupling brackets, basically. So there's no direct contact between these walls and any other of the structure in the rest of the home. The other thing that we did is, as the Paradise spec for us, was these walls are sitting on top of this floor, but the ceiling itself is actually suspended. So there are springed brackets actually supporting all of what you see here now, including the speakers, the lighting, the trim build-outs. All of that is actually suspended from a roof system above, and there's actually an air gap between the top of the crown and this fur down that you see here around the perimeter of the room. So it is literally floating over these walls so that no sound can actually transfer from one to the other.
So much. Like, the more we talk about this room, the more layer upon layer upon layer. But I love the fact that we bring in the experts, we bring in the engineers, we bring in the people that can make his vision a reality. And you and your company have done an amazing, amazing work in here. This has been super cool.
Thank you. Appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. This is one of the most fun projects outside of just building a home that I've done in my career,
So it's always a very collaborative process. And then internally with Paradise Theater, when I started it, it was a one-man operation. I collaborated with myself and everybody else. And now we've got a team of engineers, interior designers, architectural designers, CAD designers, project managers, and quality control people that does all the things that we do in order to create a great room.
So when you're building a home theater, aesthetics is a huge part. Now, not everybody wants an aesthetically beautiful, decorative, ornate theater room, but the homeowner wanted that in this.
Yes.
And he wanted to bring some of the elements of his theater or of his home into this theater. And so that's where you, Sarah, the interior designer from Paradise Theater, you came alongside of the homeowner and said, okay, what is your vision? So walk us through that. What was that process look like? What are some things that you did on the interior design side of it? Because I know that there's got to be some other things we got to think about. We can't just think about just the aesthetics of it. We want it to still perform well. So I'd love to have that conversation on what you did in this room.
Yeah, we had the fortunate opportunity to work with Robert, and he had a very clear vision of what he wanted the space to look and feel like. A lot of very traditional elements throughout the rest of the home that he wanted to bring into this theater, and also just kind of be a sanctuary place for him to really enjoy his family with. And so we have the symbiosis of working with a client that's very invested in all of the areas of the interior to the audio and video in here, and then also working with our internal team for engineering and making sure that all of those points of his vision were being realized.
Okay. So where do you even begin? I mean, he comes to you and says, I've got some woodwork that I want to do in here, but there's other things like seating. So walk us through that process. What are some things that you had to consider on the design side of it?
Yeah, so we've got space planning to consider. We have the layout of where the room will be, and so we're considering from the outside in what are the impacts of all of these elements from the quiet room construction to the interior here. And so we started with, what does the space around the door look like so we can ensure entry, the space for the aisleways, seating here to ensure that the rear row isn't conflicted with the front row, and all of the visualization of the video is realized, and then also interior-wise being very impactful in meeting that traditional design that he was wanting.
Sure. So I see a lot of beautiful ornate woodwork, and so I know that's a big part of what this room brings to him and the joy that it brings. So walk us through what we're seeing even maybe behind you right here.
Yeah, so the overall room, we've got so much symmetry within this room. Each of the wall panels equal out in size, and the columns are placed at appropriate points to allow the speakers to sit behind and still be projected to those main seating positions. And with the column here, these were designed so there's the tweeter of the speaker right within here. And so I developed this design here to allow that speaker to come through at the appropriate position, working with our engineer to ensure that nothing is occluded there.
Sure. So are there times where you had some ideas like, hey, I want to do this, and engineering is like, Sarah, you can't do that. That's going to impact the performance. And so then I love that you're saying that you had to have that conversation. Here's my idea. Maybe Robert has the idea. Then you give your ideas, but then you also have to work that team that we were talking about, so much a part of this whole conversation to make sure that the things that you do on this side don't impact the things that they're doing on the engineering side.
Yeah, I mean, particularly with this grill work, at the beginning phases, I had really scaled it down, so you had a lot more repetition within there. So we discussed scaling it up, and then we needed a little additional space within here, so we narrowed the sides and grew the scale of that grill work so that it would allow those things to not be, the speakers and the acoustics that exist behind that space to not be occluded.
Yeah. Another big aspect to me in designing a room is the ambiance that you're creating. And a big part of ambiance is lighting. And so I know you had a big role in that as well. Walk us through the lighting choices in here.
Yeah, so we have a lot of opportunity to really create an atmosphere with the lighting. We didn't want it to be painfully obvious that there was lighting in here, so the concealment of that is really important as well. And so what we're doing in this space is kind of creating this really comfortable zone at the eye level with these sconces that create a nice ambiance. We're painting the walls with these wall washes that really draw your attention inward as you come through that front door.
Sure.
So it's fleshing out this wall, and you really see the details and the ornateness of the millwork, all the trim work and flat work in here, and it just creates a really nice texture on the wall, so your eye is just naturally drawn to it. So we have downlighting at the top of the room that's creating just kind of a flood of light.
Okay.
So you can see where you're going. And then around the perimeter here, we've got linear lighting that just enhances the ceiling design.
Right. Because that's actually firing up towards the ceiling, right?
Yes. So there's a linear that wraps the full perimeter and is firing up, creating a really nice graze.
Now, Sarah,
those details.
I'm assuming maybe is there software that you're using to be able to draw this out to see kind of give you an idea of, all right, if I put a light here, here's what it's going to affect?
Yeah, so I worked with some of our lighting manufacturers, making sure that the output that each of these fixtures is putting out is going to be positioned in a good way to where it's not creating any super sharp, hard lines,
Sure.
Not creating shadows against all of this millwork detail. So there was a lot of like drawing and redrawing to make sure that all of those things were considered. The soffits also have these wall washes, and so that was particularly interesting to try and integrate because we've got mechanical HVAC that runs through those. And so we planned those housings to really kind of like squeeze into the open spots in there. So.
I love it. This is such a cool room, And then even down here, you've got step lighting. So,
We've got step lighting for safety and really to highlight this beautiful carpet that Robert's chosen.
And even more woodwork down here as well.
Yes.
Now, Sarah, I've visited many, many home theater. I've done a lot of home theater tours here on my channel, traveled all over the world, but I've never seen a home theater, a private cinema that has an arched ceiling. So that's really intriguing to me, but I'm sure there's a purpose behind that. Can you walk us through that?
Yeah, so the inspiration that Robert had given us for a lot of the doorways and ceiling space throughout the home had this really special barreling ceiling. And so we've had this opportunity because we've got soffits on both sides that hold the mechanical. We had this really special opportunity to barrel the ceiling, whereas we have some of the speakers that come down a little bit lower on the sides.
Right.
And we were able to kind of push that up towards the center so that we can get this special effect. We didn't go so overboard to where it would destroy that effect that the engineers were trying to get, and Keisha was trying to get with these speaker placements.
Right.
So it allowed them to still be arrayed towards the main seating positions so that they still function the way they need to, but then creating this really beautiful barrel that really draws your eye up and allows you to have more ceiling space as well. Michael, one of the challenges with doing this barrel ceiling is making sure that the fabric can stretch across and you don't lose any of the curvature of the fabric panel or it's sagging in the middle. And so we planned out the widths of these and the placement of the track to where, the fabric track I should say, where it's tucked in so that it will maintain this curvature. And we didn't go so extreme to where it had the potential to begin sagging or anything, but just to maintain that curvature. And then in the beams and the main fabric panels, those are all acoustically transparent for all of the speakers that are also within the beams and the acoustic panels that are housed behind.
Yeah, so we've got 8 ceiling speakers up there, and so all of those are aimed at this listening position, but you got this beautiful ornate woodwork, and you have to figure out how can we build that to tie in. I know Robert's big on symmetry. You know, he likes things to flow, and so I can look at this column and I see just this beautiful flow that goes all the way up, extends to the top, and comes all the way back down, and building that in such a way that it looks beautiful, it ties in with his vision, ties in with the rest of his home, but also serves a purpose. And then having that acoustically transparent screen and going back to lighting, you're able to light behind there so that we can hit a button, or Robert can hit a button and reveal this beautiful masterpiece of these cool speakers that we otherwise wouldn't have access to.
Yeah, we incorporated the speakers and the acoustics that Keshav has all engineered behind there, so that it really brings it into the interior space as well and gives you a very cool effect to be able to see all the hard work that's going on behind the scenes, and then it brings it into this beautiful interior. And yeah, I feel like everything just very much speaks to each other. There's a lot of symbiosis between all of these elements, and the arc on the grill work that we did carries into the ceiling. Each piece of the molding and paneling very much is in line to lean into Robert's love of symmetry.
All right, Keshav, we have now built this beautiful home theater, this private cinema. We've got all of the engineering that went into it, even taking measurements before and during the process. But once you build a theater of this caliber, and really any theater, that's not the end. There's much more to it. And so calibration is a crucial aspect to any of you guys that are building a theater that want to get the optimal sound. And so I'd love for you to kind of walk us through on what does the calibration side of it look like for especially something of this scale. We got a lot more equipment, we got a lot more speakers, we got a lot more theater seats that we got to optimize for. And maybe even just share, like, what was Robert's, because he probably experienced this right after everything's set up. What was his thoughts on that? So walk us through that.
Yeah, so calibration, it's the last step that just brings everything together. So what that does is you're optimizing the system for the room, for the seating position, and for the client's taste. So, in this case, I was very fortunate that Robert was here during the calibration, so I was able to collaborate with him and tune the room to his preference.
Okay.
So what this process looks like is first gain staging all the speakers, making sure that every speaker is hitting the exact same level at the main listening position. Then time alignment, making sure all the speakers are firing at the same time and hitting the main listening position at that same time. And then you have phase aligning the subwoofers with the mains, so trying to find out where that right crossover point is. In this room, we have the infrasonic subs as well.
Right.
So that's another set of crossovers that we have to figure out where the infrasonics are going to blend with the audible subs.
Sure.
And then it's tuning the room to taste, equalization. So the room, when you're listening to speakers in a room, right? You're listening, half of what you're hearing is the speaker,
Right.
and half of what you're hearing is the room. And the room has some effects that are detrimental to the sound, and
Sure.
some that support the sound, right? It gives a sense of space and immersion. And so, with an immersive cinema like this, that's really important. That's why we have these diffusers and all that. But there's parts of the room, like standing waves, room modes,
Right.
or, we put the speakers behind a baffle wall, so the baffle is going to add low frequency to the speaker that we then have to calibrate out
Right.
and balance it. So that's a big part of what calibration is. Now, I was able to fortunately collaborate with Robert, and the thing I love about Robert is that he loves bass. He's a bass head.
Yeah, he's my kind of guy.
Same. So, but there's a challenge with that, right? To get that amount of bass that he wants, but still be able to hear the mids and the highs and the low mids very clearly.
Yeah.
So we got it, we dialed it in, and the funny thing is when Robert first heard the room, he was actually pretty disappointed.
No way.
He's like, the vocals are sounding thin. There's just something's not right.
Right.
But that's where the magic of calibration happens. Setting the crossover on the speaker correctly, getting that time alignment between the speaker and the sub. All that comes together. And, luckily, after the calibration was done, Robert was really happy with it. I was stoked.
Sure.
And yeah, and you had mentioned too, just there's so much tactile energy in here, but it's all still very detailed.
Very
And
much so.
that can only happen after calibration. Even with the best system in the best room, calibration is the most important process at the end.
Yeah, and that's a huge part. So some people like to look at graphs. They measure and they want a flat frequency response. Some people go to the other extreme and they just listen by ear, or they're looking at a projection image and they're trying to figure out, okay, what looks best. My understanding, you kind of take a blended approach. You do the math, you do the science, you do what looks good, but then you also take your customers, your clients' feedback, and you tweak that as well. And then as you're listening, is that something that you use what your ears are experiencing in here? Can what we see on a graph maybe not translate to what we're hearing?
Yeah, I mean, audio is subjective, right? I mean, what translates on a graph doesn't mean that it's going to sound good. And so, the way I like to calibrate is, I set up multiple mics, about 6 microphones in the room. And then I'm looking at, well, first, actually, I'm doing critical listening. Before I even look at any measurements, I just listen to some 2-channel, watch some movies,
Sure.
and just kind of take some notes on things I notice in the room that need to be fixed. And then I take some measurements and see, okay, the things am I hearing? Can I see it on the graph? Is it correlating?
Right.
And that kind of tells you, okay, there's some problem frequencies here. Let me EQ that out. So, I don't really like to EQ or calibrate with my eyes because at the end of the day, we're listening with our ears.
Sure.
So, so that was a big part of it was critical listening, tuning, using the measurements because you want the empirical data to support what you're hearing, and then, of course, Robert's preferences.
So you and the team came here prior to us arriving last night, and you did some final tweaking and calibration and had a conversation with Robert, and he was saying that, he loved the system, absolutely blown away, but 2-channel was just kind of okay. Like there was some things that were missing, and so you were able to take that information and that feedback and tweak his system. And I believe you said you created some profiles, correct?
Yeah, we have multiple profiles. So we have one that's optimized for the front row, another one for the back row, and then both have one with extra bass, and then one that's a little bit more balanced. And then we have a 2-channel preset that we created yesterday, which it's gets a little more of the high frequency content, tames the bass just a little bit. That maybe for movies sounds good, but for music might be a little too much. And that allows you to have flexibility in when you're watching a movie or listening to a soundtrack.
Now, is that all done in the JBL synthesis?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's profiles that you've set up, and you mentioned front row and rear row, so maybe Robert and his wife are sitting here snuggling on the love seat like they like, and they are sitting up front, and so he can hit a button on there and it's tuned for just those seating versus like last night we were watching Dune 2, and now we've got people in the front and the rear, so that might be a different calibration in itself. Mm-hmm. So being able to add that flexibility, and again, that takes a great level of expertise. I don't know how to do that, to be honest with you, but you do, and your team has come in and really just walked side by side with Robert to make sure that this is the absolute best experience and really met all of his needs and his goals.
Yeah, the whole everything this is about is just optimizing for the best experience. So yeah, like you said, having for the front row, you want everything just tuned just right. For in the back, everything tuned just right. But one thing I want to mention is, when I'm doing these calibrations, I don't want to make something good for the front row, but have something detrimental for the back row. So that's why I set up the multiple mics, take measurements, and see that, okay, if I'm making an adjustment here, how is that affecting all the other seats? But in a room like this that's well designed and where we could plan from the beginning, there is a lot of cohesion between the seats. So you don't really see big variation between the front and the back row, which is really important when it comes to calibrating.
Speaking of the collaboration, it's really gratifying to have this teamwork approach. I remember one time I was taking a conference call with one of our clients, and I was on the call, and we were presenting one of the phases of design, and the client said, well, Sam, I've met Keshav, and I've met Kyle, and I've met Sarah. Who are you, and what do you do for Paradise Theater?
I love it.
And it was really one of the most gratifying moments in my career is that I knew that I had a team that would carry the vision of Paradise Theater forward. And that extends out to our other collaboration partners with the interior designers that we work closely with, and most importantly, the integrators that we work closely with, because without that teamwork, we just couldn't do the work that we do. So, it's better to have a team.
100%.
Yeah.
Sam, my audience is international. I mean, they're all over the world, all over the globe. So I know you do most of your work's probably here in the U.S.
That's
so
true.
It's not just local to where you're at, because you're in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Thus the shirt. I love it. But you do it all over the United States. And so if there's some of you that are looking at doing something of this magnitude, or maybe not even quite this magnitude, but you want it done well, reach out to these guys. They know what they're doing. Like I said, this is by far the best private cinema that I've ever experienced, but there was so much that went into this, like so many details. It's more than just buying good gear. It's more than just building the right size room. It's all these other components that we talked about, the acoustics, the engineering, the noise floor, everything has to come together to make that work. And so you and your team headed that up and led it with excellence.
Right, and with the collaboration of a great team of the integrator, the builder, and of course the most important collaborator is our client, because our client gave us the opportunity, had the vision to create something special, and gave us the opportunity to do our best work, which is a privilege.
Well, it's like he was able to fulfill his dream, but you were able to fulfill your dream of doing your best work.
Absolutely.
So I love that, and I love the fact that Robert was he was a really integral part in building this room. Like, he knew some things that he wanted, and he came to you, the expert, and said, hey, I want this to happen. What are the steps? What is that process? Because he doesn't know. He doesn't build theaters for a living. And so you've been doing this for 30 plus years. And so you know those areas. You know the things that you've got to consider. Things like HVAC. You know, how are we going to route that stuff? And how much do we need? And all of those pieces have to come together to make something of this magnitude.
That's right. In this case, we were very blessed to have the opportunity to be involved at the very beginning of the project. So we were able to work with Robert and decide where we wanted to see the theater be placed. To make it a quiet room for the rest of the house, having it outside of the whole floor plan of the house was a great advantage. And so we placed it off of the game room, as you saw, and it touches the rest of the house on one wall. Well, that one wall ended up being 3 feet thick in order to create the noise floor that we wanted to create and the isolation that we wanted to create, and positioning it, the depth of the excavation, all of those things had to be planned early. And then once we got that initial footprint planned, then we go into what we call functional concepting. And functional concepting allows us to do a certain level of predictive modeling, low frequency modeling generally, in order to determine where the size of the room, so that we can get the best bass response in the room, and the positioning of the seats, and all of those things. They're interactive. They work together. So our engineering team worked on that, and then we came up with some concepts of what we thought things were going to be as far as the interior design goes. And Robert was able to give us some really good input because of the classic millwork architectural details that were going to be in the rest of the house. Right. Wanted those to be in the theater as well. So we were able to take that information, and our interior designer came up with some mock-ups to, okay, we're going to have this kind of molding and so forth. That all impacts the dimensions of the room. And it's important to do that functional concept with enough. If we spend all of our time and went all the way to the finish line on the design at that point, well, the house would never get built. So we have to make some assumptions, and we did, and it worked out very well. So that's a functional concept, and then after that we do fine tuning of the engineering, and the next step, and you'll meet our interior designer to talk about that, is where we actually create the interior design. In this case, we worked closely with Robert to create a design that he was happy with. Sometimes we work with an interior designer, and we work with them to make sure that their vision can be integrated with the performance without compromise. Right. But in this case, we got to do it all, which was a privilege and a lot of fun. And, like you said, another dream come true. So, yeah. And then the final step is after all of the design is completed, the room is going to be built. And so Paradise Theater provides support and what we call quality assurance and construction administration. So we make visits to the project, take measurements, do inspections, and do all of those things to make sure that it's going through the process. We're catching anything that needs to be caught early, and it's kind of like your fine motor car on the assembly line. They're going to check and make sure that all the pieces got put together right. So at the end of the day, you can go fast as you want and enjoy your ride.
So you're actually taking measurements even before the room is complete. Now think about that. Most of us, like me, I build the room and then I see how it measures and I'm like, uh-oh, we got issues. You started at the beginning.
Right.
What can we do structurally, acoustically, dimensions, all of these things so that we can mitigate that? So we're pretty good at it, the modeling
Right.
to know ahead of time, this is going to be a pretty good room. But I love the fact that you're taking it a step further. You're taking measurements even during the build process to make sure and to verify
Right.
what your models had already suggested, correct?
Exactly. So that you can make fine-tuning adjustments as necessary and based on actual measurements.
Could you imagine if you finish this beautiful room and you're like, oh guys, we made a big mistake. We got to tear these walls down and go out another foot or whatever. So probably a good idea you do that, Sam.
I can not only imagine it, I can remember it. So, School of Hard Knocks, right?
There you go.
But yeah, it's really a privilege to work on a room like this and be able to see the fruits of everybody's labor.
Well, you've done an amazing job.
Thank you.
So Robert, as we are getting ready to land this plane, first of all, thank you. Like, this has truly been a remarkable experience to get to know you, to get to know your sweet wife, to meet the great folks, the team that has come together to help you build your dream personal cinema. So I'd love to just ask you a couple of questions. So one of them being, you had the vision, the team came in to help make that vision a reality. So did the destination, what we have now, did that meet the vision that you had?
It absolutely did. I had high expectations for this theater, and it absolutely met the expectations. It was spot on to what I was hoping for.
Well, they did an amazing job here. So in this theater of this scale, again, most of us aren't going to be able to experience this. And no, he's not selling tickets, so you can't come and hang out with him all the time. But you've created a beautiful space for really what captures the essence of why we do this. And that's because we've got friends and family members, and this is a place that you can come together with those people that you love and share a common experience, a common joy for movies, for music. And so maybe talk about that aspect. What does this theater mean to you and your family and the friends that get a chance to come over and experience it?
Well, probably my favorite part of this is it allows me to host my brothers in Christ and my circle of friends on a regular basis in a venue that they want to come to.
Yeah.
It's enticing for them, and it just enables me to have a opportunity to strengthen the bonds I have with my community and my friends, and that's the most fun part of this.
Sure.
Is having families over, guys over, even kids over, and it's enabling other people to enjoy this. It gives me the most joy.
Absolutely. Well, it's given me joy, and I know Brad as well, being in your home. You've been such gracious host. Is there anything in the room that you would have changed? I mean, this is a 5-year process.
Yeah.
I'm sure
I would have changed the 5-year part and the cost.
Sure.
But the end result is fantastic.
That's awesome. Well, I think they nailed it. Like you said, they absolutely nailed every aspect of this room. I mean, I'm looking at it going, there's nothing I would critique. There really isn't. There's nothing that I would go, well, if I know you guys on the comments, you're gonna be like, well, if it was me, I would do this. Well, you're not Robert. And he did it the way that he wanted to do it, to meet his vision, to meet his desires and his goals. And I just want to commend you because I've experienced a lot. Nothing quite like this.
Well, Michael, I have enjoyed having you at my home, and I'll extend an invite for you to come back anytime.
I'll be glad to accept that invitation. I'd love to bring my family up and check it
Please
out.
do.
That'd be sweet. Well, guys, I'm going to leave a link down in the description to basically all the folks that had a part in this, because there's a lot of people. And so if you got any questions or comments, leave them down in the comment section. But man, this has been fun, Robert. Thank you so much. This has been a blast.
Thank you, Michael. Enjoyed it a lot.
Guys, hope you enjoyed the video. God bless, and we'll catch you in the next one.